living in Ecuador for almost 5 years now, and we do not own a car. And like in many other countries, we don't need a car.
Do you need a vehicle in Ecuador? Since I have a motorcycle, I do have some thoughts on this situation. So in this video, I'm going to react to and give my thoughts on the reasons Amelia and JP said you don't need a car in Ecuador. By doing so, it'll help you better decide if a vehicle is necessary or not for you. So let's see what they have to say.
The first reason you might want to ditch your car is because it will save you a lot of money.
I think I get what you mean, but please clarify.
Automobiles are expensive in Ecuador compared to the United States.
Automobiles are definitely a luxury item here in Ecuador due to them having high import taxes, not to mention the questionable Ecuadorian salaries. Cars can cost $15,000 and up, so most people opt to finance them for several years, which is pretty tough in and of itself. And by doing so, they end up raising the final price of the car substantially. That's also why if you decide to buy a used car, you'll notice that the price is very high, even if the car is several years old. Crazy stuff.
We had 2 cars when we lived in Denver and 1 car loan.
I really feel like no matter where you are, having more than 1 car is very expensive. I could understand maybe a car and a motorcycle, but having 2 cars definitely sounds like big bucks.
With all the maintenance and gas and insurance and everything else, we were spending over $1,200 a month.
In Ecuador, it's also true that maintenance for cars can be quite expensive. This is due to the import fees, but this time, not of the cars, although the brand will somewhat influence this as well. But it's more of the parts and materials needed to fix and maintain the car. And don't even get me started on gas prices, which are still insanely high. On the other end of the spectrum though, when we talk about motorcycles, maintenance and repairs are actually quite cheap. And even when it comes to gas, I personally only fill my motorcycle with gas once every 2 weeks. And sometimes I'll fill it up once every week. And if you're wondering how much that comes out to, it's always only around $5 to $6 each refill. Not that bad, right? All that being said though, remember that your lifestyle, my lifestyle, Amelia and JP's lifestyle, totally different lifestyles. So the amount of times you have to go out is definitely going to determine how much gas your vehicle is going to need.
We spend about $25 a month on transportation now. Most of that is in a cab riding back from the grocery store.
You know, when I heard $25 a month on transportation, I almost contemplated throwing out my motorcycle. But then I quickly awoke from that fever dream and I realized that that number is very unrealistic for me and probably many others who come here. Let's analyze this and go into a little more detail. Bear with me, please. If you were to go out every day, at least once a day, to a location that requires you to grab a cab, that would mean you'd be spending $1.50 there and $1.50 back, meaning about $3 minimum each day. Multiply that by 7 days a week and you have $21. And multiply that again by 4 weeks in a month and you have $81 of transportation through taxis. And that's assuming that you get charged the minimum and also assuming that you go out every day. But as you could see, just with that calculation, we're already over triple the amount that Amelia and JP spend on their transportation in taxis. And I have to put this out there because I personally go out the majority of days, and maybe you who's watching this video also tends to go out a lot.
The next reason why we love not owning a car is because it's so much less stressful.
Yeah, I can't really say anything about that, especially considering that from the moment you decide to own a vehicle, you're already burdening yourself with the thought that as soon as the vehicle gets off the lot, it's already gone down in value.
With all of the traffic, especially.
Traffic here in Ecuador can be almost as bad as the States. This is due to a lot of the streets being quite narrow, although that's actually more of a consequence of people parking where they really shouldn't. So if you don't own a car, then you definitely save yourself from that stress.
And there's so many cars in bumper to bumper traffic waiting through stoplights 2 or 3 or 4 times.
The thing here is that you definitely do end up avoiding everything you just mentioned if you don't get into a vehicle at all. But if you're taking a taxi or any form of public transportation, then you still have bumper to bumper traffic as well as having to wait through various stoplights. And the only real difference here is that you're not the one driving. What I will say as a motorcycle driver is that you definitely do end up avoiding some of these situations. And this is obviously due to how compact motorcycles are. And the fact that here you can actually go through the spaces in between cars in order to reach the front of the lane. And remember, I said can, not that you should. And I definitely have more secret Ecuador driving tips, But those are for another video, so make sure you're subscribed and have notifications on so that you don't miss when that video comes out.
When we see road rage, people are really unhappy that they have to drive and they take it out on the rest of us people on the road.
JP, are you sure we're in the same Ecuador? Road rage here in Ecuador, I think, is even worse, in my opinion, than the United States. I'm gonna have to edit in a prove me wrong table here. I can't count the amount of times I've heard people insulting each other from their cars. Not to mention how much people use their horns here. I swear, when I lived in the States, I'd never hear anyone honking their horn. And yet over here, I hear it at every light. I hear people honking their horn at me before the light turns green. And I'm like, bruh, chill. We're all gonna make it to where we have to go. And you'd think you'd be free from that mess if you were walking. Heck no. People honk at you for crossing the street on a red light just because the light just happened to turn green while you were crossing. And some people honk at you even before that because they're already prepping to go before the light turns green. Once again,
We also save a lot of time because we aren't sitting in traffic.
when it comes to saving time, it's very situational, I'd say. Because if you're talking about going someplace close, then yeah, taking your car might put you in some unnecessary traffic, not to mention make you waste unnecessary amounts of money on gas. So walking would definitely be preferable. But if you're talking about going from one side of the city to the other, then I definitely have to argue that even if you avoided all traffic lights and you walked marcha style like Jefferson Paris, you'd still most likely make it after the car, since the car definitely goes much faster. Not to mention how uncomfortable it would be to arrive sweaty at a place, especially if you're meeting someone or going someplace nice. Once again though, as a motorcycle driver, I'd say that riding a motorcycle definitely saves you a ton of time, not to mention you won't be sweaty when you arrive. With the main downside being the fact that you have to wear a helmet makes it so that you can't arrive at a place with the exact hairstyle that you'd like.
We don't have to go get inspections, register it, get tags, pay taxes. We don't have to do any of that stuff.
When it comes to these processes, you definitely save a lot of time since you don't have to do them. Having to enroll, matriculate, my motorcycle is always a hassle, and I hear that for cars, it's much worse.
Because we walk everywhere, we are both mentally and physically healthier and fitter.
Now that we come across the topic of walking, I definitely do agree with the health and fitness side of it. I'm actually very into health and fitness myself, but I'd have to argue that there are actually a few downsides to walking as well, including the one I mentioned before about arriving to places sweaty. When it comes to walking to places that are close, I'm 100% down for that. But when it comes to going to further places, then you do run the risk of something bad happening to you. And I'm pretty sure someone's gonna say,
but it depends on where you walk and what time of day you're walking.
and yeah, sure, normally I'd agree with that, but recently a friend of mine got robbed while walking to the park. She was accompanied by her cousin and nephew. It was in broad daylight, 4 p.m. to be precise. There were people walking a few feet in front of her and even people walking a few feet behind her. Since she normally carries a pocket knife, I actually asked her why she didn't fight back or why no one decided to help her. And she said the guy pulled out a revolver, so there was nothing her or anyone around her could do. At least she only ended up losing her cell phone that day. But that situation could have been much worse. And trust me, I'm not here to condemn walking or to scare anyone away from coming to Ecuador. But I'm always gonna be as real as possible with you because I would hate for the same thing to happen to you when you come to Ecuador.
You can definitely ride your bike. Ecuador is very bike friendly. A lot of the cities have added in more bike lanes. They even have bike rentals.
I really feel like I gotta get Amelia and JP over to Puerto Viejo, or I gotta go to where they're going. Because it almost feels like we're living in two totally different worlds. Not every city has bike lanes. Heck, even Puerto Viejo only has a few, but not enough to reliably get you around the city. Although that definitely doesn't stop people from riding their bikes here. But it's super duper dangerous since they ride their bikes on the roads. I don't recommend anyone ride their bikes on the road, especially with how fast cars zoom by and how many times bikes have been this close to getting hit by a car. And it's difficult to find fault in one or the other because most of the time the imprudence is from both parties. If you ride your bike on the street, you have to be more careful than the car because the car can kill you. And if you're driving a car, you definitely shouldn't be trying to pass red lights before they turn green. So I definitely don't see riding a bike as something ideal, at least in some cities.
You can rent the scooters on some of the streets. We saw those in Loja.
Yeah, not a lot of cities have the whole scooter rental thing. But I'm definitely glad Loja does.
The public transportation is great in Ecuador as it is in many other countries.
Hold up. Define great.
Great means of an extent, amount, or intensity considerably above average.
Considerably above average? I don't know about that.
It is extremely reliable, efficient, and affordable.
Reliable, efficient, and affordable. Out of the three, I can probably only fully agree with one, which is affordable. Buses are definitely very cheap, and this goes for buses in the city as well as intercity buses. As for reliable, I can barely agree with because the way that buses drive here is absolutely atrocious. I've seen buses race to places and take turns that make Fast and the Furious scenes look bad. Seriously, I've seen these buses tilt to the point where they look like they're whispering to anyone close enough to listen. As a motorcycle driver, the vehicles that I fear most are buses, other motorcycles, and taxis. When you're driving a motorcycle, you're most in danger when you're around any of these three vehicles. And part of me thought that it was only in Puerto Viejo, but a family member who was recently in Guayaquil could only describe the driving of buses and most other vehicles as nasty. And I actually had some hope for Quito, but then a neighbor told me that the buses over there have this brake system that makes them stop almost instantly. So if you're positioned very poorly behind a bus and they decide to stop to pick someone up, which they do tend to do even outside of bus stops, then that's almost a guaranteed crash right there. If you're in Quito right now, let us know in the comments if that really is the case. Although in all honesty, a crash like that wouldn't even 100% be the fault of the bus, but also the fault of the person driving that close to the bus. But the only thing I could say to that, that's just the way people drive here in Ecuador. I'll talk more on driving styles and such in my tips video, but yeah, buses don't really seem all that reliable in my honest opinion. And when it comes to efficiency, that really does vary. I mean, you can't be all that efficient if you're behind 20 cars in traffic, can you?
You can also take a private driver. There are lots of taxis available.
Like I said before, you can grab a taxi for about $1.50 a ride, which is quite affordable in comparison to the United States. And that's also why I used to use them a lot myself.
And there are rideshare companies throughout Ecuador. Uber is in a couple of cities, as is Cabify and Azu Taxi.
You can use Uber and Cabify, and those could actually be even cheaper than the taxis, but the quality of the ride will vary depending on the vehicle that's sent to you.
And you could hire a personal driver.
As for personal drivers, I'd really only recommend them if you're planning on staying here a short amount of time. Because if you're in Ecuador for the long run, then a personal driver will definitely be a very heavy expense.
After 90 days, you're supposed to get an Ecuadorian driver's license and take the test and go through that hassle.
Getting a license is a process not just of getting the license itself, but also having to take a course and a test to get that license. And all of that is in Spanish. So if that doesn't sound appealing to you at all, then it's definitely something you'd want to avoid.
Insurance is not required in Ecuador, so if you get into an accident and it's the other person's fault, they may not have insurance, so you may be stuck footing the bill anyway.
Yeah, most people don't seem to worry too much about insurance, especially since they take really good care of their cars. Not to mention that it would just be another expense to something that's already way expensive. Your best bet in an accident is for there to be police around, because if there aren't, the situation could get a little bit complicated. But we'll go more into detail on that in the driving tips video, so stay tuned for that. All that being said, I personally feel like my motorcycle has been my best investment while I've been here in Ecuador. It gets me everywhere I need to go, it's not overly expensive, and it even gets me out of tight situations here at home. Of course, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Riding a motorcycle is very dangerous, and it certainly doesn't have the most utility when you're trying to carry around a lot of groceries. But like I said before, in certain situations, it definitely does outshine a car. I do really like the things that Amelia and JP said, but only for certain parts of the country. Since if there's things like bike lanes, rental scooters, and being able to walk around without having to worry something might happen to you, then heck, even I'm down for it. But for a large part of the country, you definitely have to weigh your options. Like people here in Puerto Viejo say that it's better to spend $1.50 and grab a taxi than to walk and risk losing your phone and maybe even your life. And for what? Just to save a few bucks? It makes a ton of sense. But what doesn't make sense,
and what infuriates me, really,
is that we even have to worry about these things in the first place, knowing that we have police in every city, obviously. But something I didn't know before I came to Ecuador is that the police don't always do their jobs. And that's why people panic and worry when they go out, when it shouldn't have to be that way. And there are a ton of other things that I wish I knew before coming to Ecuador. And if you'd like to know what they are, then definitely check out this video. A big shout out to Amelia and JP. Check out their channel. Hit the like button if this video was useful. Happy birthday to my brother and my dog Chief. Consider supporting me or becoming a member on buymeacoffee.com. And as always, ace out. When it comes to these processes, oh my god, that's weird.